welcome everybody from all over the world tonight to hear about mortgages in Portugal. This Portugal Calling webinar from Expats Portugal, Understanding Mortgages with Vera Simão from Mortgage Direct. How are you, Vera? Good to see you on our screen.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, guys, to everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm trying to help you with all the questions. So feel free to start asking whatever you'd like to know about the mortgages in Portugal at the moment, and I'll be more than happy to help you.
Wonderful. Okay, so yes, as Vera says there, get the questions coming into the chat if you will, as well of course, all your celebrations, troubleshooting, anything else you want to know about moving to Portugal. We'll do our best to help you. The best time to return for the broader information, the comprehensive information for moving to Portugal, of course, is at 9 with our Dream Team session. So tune in for that. But for the time being, let's find out about mortgages. Let's get introduced to Vera. Can you tell us about your company, Vera, first of all, Mortgages Direct, and a little bit about yourself as well in the industry here?
Sure. So Mortgage Direct, our company, is based actually in Spain, but I'm part of the Portugal team. So I'm the only advisor who can actually work for Portugal and Spain. I'm based in Algarve. And I worked for Mortgage Direct for 4 years, almost 4 years now. We have a very close relationship with almost all the banks in Portugal, with special conditions and rates for our clients working with Mortgage Direct directly instead of going directly to the bank. So we can obtain you faster approvals with better rates and better conditions.
Wonderful. Okay. And of course, if you just want to cut straight to the chase, you can find Mortgage Direct in the Expats Portugal business directory and get in touch with the company. So I think it's fair to say there are frequently asked questions, aren't there, when it comes to mortgages, the multiples, the age limits, the rates, of course. Let's get into those tonight. Did you want to say anything about the broader real estate picture and the buoyancy of the market here, Vera, in Portugal?
Well, I would say, like, normally, I used to say this and every Thursday in our Zoom calls, is that lately the market went a bit down, I would say, and that is because of the Euribor going up for the last month. But from last month, everything started going back to normal. Still high, not so low as last year, of course, but we still are able to get nice mortgages at the moment. So in Portugal, and I just have a call with the bank today, just before our webinar, just to confirm that we can offer now fixed mortgage, fixed term for 3%, at least on the first 4 years, which is very good at the moment. So fully fixed, also possible in 20, 30 years, in about 3.7, 3.8. But at the moment, I would say that the best will be going for a mixed rate, which is going to be fixed in the next first 5 years or 4 years in the case at 3%. And then after that, Euribor at the time plus spread, so variable rate.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. So who qualifies for that? This is a frequently asked question, and we've got our first question from our audience tonight coming in. Loan limit of 80% of appraisal for foreigners, question mark, and also wants to know about MPI, mortgage protection insurance. So how much can you borrow with that great rate that you're talking about there, generally speaking, Vera?
So if you are a non-resident in Portugal, the maximum you can achieve with the bank, any bank in Portugal, will go to 70%. So by law, for a non-resident, 70% loan to value is the maximum we can achieve. Okay. However, if you are buying your main house in Portugal, imagine you're moving from your country to Portugal, and if you're buying your main residence, some banks can go up to 80%.
Okay.
And if you're living in Portugal, paying your taxes is also 80%. The same for the age. Normally, maximum age will be 75 years old. Some banks can go to 80 years old, only in the case that you're buying your main house in Portugal. Okay. But normally have in mind 70%, as it's not easy to obtain over 70% or even to achieve 80%, only if you are a resident in Portugal, a tax resident in Portugal.
Okay, so 70 and 80% depending on your status there. Thank you for that, Vera. I'm not sure what Marcelo means by no MPI. What does MPI mean, Marcelo? Does that make any sense to you, Vera, or do we need Marcelo to elaborate on that? Oh, he says right in the question. I do beg your pardon, Marcelo. Mortgage protection insurance. How does that work here in Portugal?
Well, what some banks will request you to have mandatory life insurance and some banks don't request a life insurance for non-residents.
So it depends on
So,
depends on the lender.
depends on the bank, on the lender.
Okay.
Sometimes for the banks who don't ask you for a life insurance, you can have not so great rate. For banks who charge life insurance, normally they offer a better rate.
Right.
What has been changing lately is that the bank in Portugal, for example, will allow the client to choose between having life insurance with the bank or outside the bank.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. All right. And thank you for the translation there, Debbie, as well. In the US, it's called PMI instead of MPI. And it's an extra charge by the bank if you haven't put down a certain percentage, usually 10%. So thank you for that translation and cultural equivalent over there, Debbie. And Philip, adding to that, PMI in US kicks in when primary mortgage is over 80%. Thank you both for that. So back to the FAQs then, Vera. Borrowing, entering into the process. Could you walk us through that, the application process, and how it works, inspections, and the likely timeline when working with you?
All right. So the first step will be once we get in contact with the client, we will going to ask you to fill out a form. This is a affordability form. So in this form, you can fill out your personal and financial details that which going to allow us to study your profile, financial profile, and make sure that it's feasible for you to obtain a mortgage. So this is the step one. After that, if we confirm that it's feasible based on your income and your debt, we're going to elaborate a quote for you to have an idea on the rates and conditions that we can obtain you and how much is going to be your monthly payment, for example, with a certain bank. After that, we will help you to open the file, put all the documents together, and prepare your file to submission for the bank. We'll submit to the bank, and in Portugal, it's much quicker than Spain, I would say. So more probably within a week time, we can get your approval. Sometimes even less than that, depending on the bank, depending how work overloaded they are. But I would say 1 week to have an approval with the bank.
Wow, that's good going.
Yeah,
How long does it take in Spain?
3 weeks.
Okay.
2 to 3 weeks. Okay,
Right.
so it's much longer.
Okay.
Sometimes even if you have a nice, easier profile with all the documentation ready, I would say even in 1 or 2 days we can achieve, because we do have a very close relationship with the banks. We close with the branches directors directly, and this is a very strong point for us to work for you and obtain you nice conditions and fast approvals. So once we submit the application to the bank and we obtain the approval, the next step is to open the bank account. Sometimes, depending on the origin country of the client, can be easier or can be harder to open the bank account. It's advisable to have a lawyer, a property lawyer, or a lawyer to help you with your NIF. At the beginning of the process, in Portugal, you do need a NIF to submit your file to the bank. In Spain, you don't need, but in Portugal, you do need to have a NIF. So the first step, if you're thinking about preparing a file to submission for the bank for mortgage, will be to have a lawyer and a NIF. Okay, if you are in Portugal, you can do it yourself, but it's always advisable to have a lawyer to help you through the process of buying a property in Portugal and obtain a NIF in order that we can send everything to the bank.
Okay.
Once we get the mortgage approved, next step I was saying is to open the bank account and then prepare to valuation to be ordered. So the bank will order a valuation of this property. This valuation needs to be at least the same as the purchase price of the property in order for your approval to be validated. So let's imagine we have an approval for 200,000 euros. Okay, so once we go to the appraisal, the report needs to state at least 200,000 euros. So the minimum is to have the same as the property price. What happens, for example, if the valuation is a little bit below the purchase price? It's still possible, but will change the approval, can be reduced a little bit based on that amount. If that makes sense.
Yep.
After that, if everything is in order with the valuation and the approval, the bank will need few days, not that much, to prepare the fin. Fin is the final letter with all the conditions for the bank. And in Portugal, we do have a reflection, what we call a cool-off period of 7 days. So even after the approval and all these steps that I just mentioned, the client by law needs to have 1 week before he's able to go into notary to sign the deeds. So 1 week cool-off period is mandatory for all the banks.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So it could actually be a very fast process. What's the quickest turnaround you've done with a client in terms of, like, you
I
know,
would say
from
1
engaging with
month.
you and then having the keys?
Well, have in mind at least a month, and this is fast already. Okay,
Yeah.
the
Right.
approval is
Yeah.
quite fast. We can have it in a week or in a few days.
Yeah.
But until you actually go to notary, there's a few steps that need to be done. It's very important to have the assistance of a lawyer during the process as well. But have in mind a month at least. Okay, a month.
Yeah, well,
6 weeks.
absolutely. I think for most people, they'll think that's pretty good going. And what sort of proportion of people are you dealing with who are buying, who are out of the country and who are in the country? Do most people wait until they get here, or are you helping lots of people buy from abroad?
80, I would say 80% non-residents and 20% residents at the moment.
Wow.
So
Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right. And sorry if I'm sounding a bit done with this. They do say there's no such thing as a silly question, but let me just check and test that theory. When you say opening the bank account, does that mean an account with the bank who's going to be lending you the money, or is it's got to be an account with the bank?
That's correct. So
Okay.
some clients, imagine you already have a bank account in Portugal with
Yes.
Santander, let's imagine, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're going to obtain the mortgage approval with BPI, for example. So we will need to have a bank account with the bank, with the lender
Yeah.
that is going to provide you the mortgage.
Okay. All right.
Always,
Yes,
with that
excellent.
bank.
All right. All right. Well, that's wonderful. That's the kind of step plan, the time scale there. And I'm actually really impressed. I think others will be too, about how quick it can be. And obviously there are other things that are plot twists and things that can get in the mix there to slow it down. But from your side, it sounds like it's a very fast process, which is wonderful.
I'm being optimistic here
Sure.
because
Sure.
I do know. Let's say it's an easy process. We don't face any problems or any surprises within the property. Sometimes can happen with evaluation or some.
Of
This
course.
is why it's so important for the client to do have a lawyer to guide you through the steps, because we at Mortgage Direct, we're going to support the client all over from the beginning until the end. So since we start the mortgage process until we go into notary, but we do deal only with the mortgage related subjects. So you need a lawyer to make sure that there's no legal problems with the property that you're buying. You will need at some point help with your NIF, with documentation, and
Yeah.
we're just going to help you only on a mortgage related. So you need a lawyer alone.
Of course. Yeah. And there are many factors beyond your control, obviously, in that process. So thank you. Yeah, that's the upside, best case scenario. So thank you for that. The valuation, who organizes that? How will that take place?
That's the bank. The bank will do it.
Okay, so the bank takes care of that. Excellent.
Normally it's around, let's say, between 200 and 250, 300 euros, but
Yeah.
that will depend also on the property,
Yes.
the price of the property, and each bank has their own price, but it's roughly almost pretty much the same.
And you
Okay.
need to you can't have your own valuation. You need to go through the bank's valuation team.
The bank
Okay.
will order the valuation.
Very good. Please say a little bit more. You touched on it briefly, I think, about age, and this often comes up with age limits and workarounds with that if it's a partnership, for example. So can you give us some scenarios on age limits and how people have worked with some of the challenges of maybe being too old for on paper for a mortgage in Portugal?
Okay, so this is a question that normally everybody outside Portugal asks. So what's the maximum age that I can borrow at the bank? So I would say 7 by law, and this is not bank related, it's by law, regulated by the Bank of Portugal.
Oh,
75 years old, it's the maximum that you can actually have a mortgage for, up to the age of 75. But like I said before, there is an exception. Some banks, I do work with the bank, for example, Bank Santander can do it. If you move into Portugal and if you're buying, as long as your main property, imagine you're going to retire and you're going to buy your main residence in Portugal, then this bank can go up to 80 years old. If you are 50 or more, and you're buying always main property, it can go up to 80 years old. And of course, as long as your debt to income ratio allow you to.
Yeah.
So for the years to come, that's your if you don't know, debt to income ratio is how the banks calculate, is the margin that the bank calculates from all your debts and your income, the financial profile.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously you've helped people with that ahead of time as well, with the affordability that you've
That's
worked
why
out with
it's
them.
important, yes,
Yeah.
for you to fill out the form, because with this form, it's a kind of pre-approval that we can provide you. Based on the form and your details, I already know that this is going to be feasible or not. Of course, there is much other factors, for example, as your currency,
Yeah.
which country are you origin from? All these are very important aspects that we have to take under consideration when studying your profile.
Okay.
So
Wonderful. And
sometimes happens that I receive a form, and based on the form and on the information, I know that it's not going to be feasible to obtain a mortgage for any reason. Age limits. For example, imagine a client that has 60 years old
yeah.
and you want to buy a property. You can buy a house in Portugal with 60 years old, but you need to have in mind that the maximum mortgage time will be 15 years.
Right.
So your debt to income ratio needs to fit this 15 years time. You understand?
Good to know.
So the
Absolutely.
longer, the more chances you have to, of course, have a longer mortgage term. If you have a mortgage only in 15 years, it's not the same as you're having in 30 years, because you're going to pay, your monthly installment is going to be the double, right?
Yeah.
So you need to fit all these aspects.
Okay. All right. I'll come back to you, Philip, in a moment. And if you could say a little bit more when there's a partnership, how the affordability works, whether it's the individuals or jointly, how does that work, and how can that work when it comes to maybe a person a bit younger, being the principal mortgage or the named person on the mortgage, but they're not the one with all the assets. How would that work?
This is a hard question, but the bank normally always consider the eldest person.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you're 25 and you have someone with 45, the bank will consider the 45
Oh,
age.
okay. Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
unless the 21 is too young. Let's say 25
Yes. Yeah. Oh, we've lost your sound there.
higher income.
There you are. You're back now. Yeah, go ahead.
Someone
Sorry,
that
we lost the sound at the beginning.
sorry, I was saying normally the bank just consider the eldest person. So if you're 25 and the one is 50, we consider the 50 for
Okay.
to calculation. Okay,
Yeah.
but sometimes if the 25 has a much higher income than the 50, maybe is not a rule. Maybe the bank can open an exception, but has to be on a case to case basis. You understand?
Yeah. And drilling down a bit more into that, I mean, this doesn't need to be a couple, does it? This could be two people who are in partnership, presumably. It could be a parent and a child who buy together. Is that possible? Or is it
Depending
generally?
depending on the bank. Some
Right.
banks don't accept to be more than one family unit.
Yeah.
So some banks you can do it two brothers, some you need to be a couple or two
Yeah.
friends. That will depend on the bank.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Thank you very much. All right. Let's go to some of these questions. Unless, Vera, there's something I've missed there that you wanted to add, but I think that's quite a lot of the FAQs covered in that little section there.
For the age, you mean?
Yeah, just generally speaking, the process, you've covered that, which I think is very helpful. So let's go to a few questions. And of course, when we stop recording, people can get a chance to ask more personal and private questions if they don't want to declare their billionaire status.
Something that it's important to mention as well is that, for example, you can do a joint application or a single application as you prefer. On the form, you have the option to add more than one applicant to the form. Okay, and once you fill out the form, the next step I always schedule a call with the client to make sure that it's feasible. Go over any questions that I might have.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not possible to understand everything by the form, or the clients don't fill out everything completed. Okay, so something important is that in Portugal we don't charge any fees mortgage related, so it's for free that you can start this process. There's no cost for you to do a mortgage process with us.
Okay. So your payments are coming from the bank and not from the client.
That's correct. We don't
Okay.
charge.
Good to know. All right, that's excellent. Let's go to some of these questions then that we've got here. And as I said, if you prefer to ask your question off air, then wait till we've paused the recording and you can do that. Great question from Marcelo. How is the credit profile evaluated for foreigners using any of the agencies in the US, like Experian, for example? Is credit simply based on income, debts, and assets, or is anything to do with credit record brought into that? How do the banks here figure that out, Vera?
I didn't understand very well. I didn't hear you very well. I'm sorry.
Well, basically, are the Portuguese banks using credit agencies, or are they simply going on your assets, your income, and your debts and other
No, you need
aspects?
to have credit reports, is what you're asking me. Credit
Yes,
report.
exactly. Yes, yeah.
So yes, it's mandatory to have a credit report. And something important on this subject, Jerry, will be, imagine a couple, English couple, one is English and the other one is French, and you're living in the US, right? So the bank will ask all the credit reports from all these three countries. You need from the UK, from France, and from the country where you're living at the moment. This is really
Right.
important. And the bank will
Okay.
ask for this.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. And that's all part. I can tell that obviously with Mortgage Direct, the whole pre-approval part is very important, and you would have taken care of all of that before you approached the bank.
The pre-approval is based on the affordability form,
Yes.
like I
Yeah.
said. Okay. After that, I schedule a meeting call with the client to review all the points and make sure they understand everything that is stated on this form.
Yeah.
After that, I explain to the client what's the documents that the bank will ask, what we're going to need to
Yes.
prepare the file. Okay. And on that, we review every single of them. For example, credit reports. We need credit report. We need bank statements. We need your work contract. You need to be under no term contract for at least an X amount of time. You cannot apply for a mortgage if you don't have a fixed contract. Imagine you are on your probation period, is not acceptable. If you are on your current job for only 6 months and you don't have a no term contract, is not acceptable.
Okay. All right. All
All
right. Yeah,
these
absolutely. Okay. Thank you for that.
I just submit the file to the bank. Once that we make sure we have the right profile and all the documentation that we can obtain an approval.
All
Okay,
right.
this is part
Excellent.
of our job at Mortgage Direct to do for you for free.
Yep. Okay. Got that. Thank you. Is it advisable to get a mortgage pre-approval prior to finding the property? I mean, basically, that's what's going to be happening anyway, isn't it? With Janine's question there.
Not really. Sometimes the clients they know they want to buy a property in Portugal, but they
Yeah.
have not found a property quite yet.
Okay.
So my advice is always to start with the mortgage process first.
Yes.
Why? You can look for a property in your head. You can think, no, I'm sure I can get a mortgage, but then you're going to lose your time calling agents, traveling to Portugal, making
Yeah.
all your steps, and then the mortgage is not approved.
Yeah.
So you lost all your time, invested money, and it's a big stress. So my advice is always start with the mortgage process first. We can obtain a pre-approval based on your financial profile, even if you don't have the property yet. And this way, you're going to be sure about the approval. On the other hand, this is a very strong point for you to negotiate with the seller or with your state agent because you already have a pre-approval from the bank in hand, and they will know that this is going to be much faster. We have the
Okay.
pre-approval. We just have
Yeah.
to handle the property documentation, and we're ready to proceed.
Yeah.
Valuation and all the steps until going to notary.
Well, that makes sense for sure. As much fun as it is looking for property, it's probably best, Janine, as Vera says there, to get the financial piece sorted out first. Barry asked last week, I asked about the age issue. As far as I know, my younger spouse, 41, can get the mortgage with insurance, and I as a guarantor. I'm hoping our mutual resources can still be considered for qualifying. So can that work, that mix with a guarantor in that particular mix there, Vera?
Well, non-residence as a guarantor doesn't really work that way. You need to be considered like the second applicant. If the first applicant is not enough, doesn't have income enough to proceed with the mortgage, so the second person always needs to be like the second applicant. And in
Okay.
that case, it's not going to work that well because the bank will consider the eldest person age.
Yes.
So
Yeah, maybe you'll want to unmute and talk more about that, Barry. Now we've got Vera here, and when we finish the recording and go through that, you might be anticipating something that's not a problem there. That there's a different workaround. So let's come back to you, Barry, on that. Janine also asking, what are the government taxes or fees the buyer is responsible to pay along with the mortgage? Is there a general percentage that you can give us, Vera?
Yes, normally the IMT, imposto selo, and what you have to pay, the fees in Portugal when you do buy a property, it's depending on the amount, okay? It's going to be higher depending on the amount, but normally it's 10%, about 10% of the purchase price.
Yes.
But if you look at the internet, Doutor Finanças, IMT,
Yeah.
this is a kind of simulator. You just enter the purchase price, and they will tell you how much you have to pay. Okay.
Do you know, Doutor Finanças, that's the second time that's come up for me today. It's a very good resource, isn't it? Doutor Finanças.
Yes, very good resource, and always you can look for almost all the answers for financial point of view, mortgage related or others, tax.
I think you're muted again there for some reason there, Vera. Your mic switched off. There you go. You're back again. Yep. Okay.
Hear me now?
Yep. Well, you're back.
I would say it's a very good tool. So
Yes.
Doutor Finanças, just look for Doutor Finanças, IMT.
Yep.
Okay. And that will lead you to a type of a calculator where you answer the details of the property, and you can immediately know how much you have to.
Very good. Okay, Janine, that is, yeah, Doutor Finanças there. And of course, to get in touch with Vera, the link is in the chat as well. So thank you very much for that there, Astrid.
Sorry, let me add something. When we do prepare a quote and we do send a quote to our clients, besides the rates, the conditions, we already do this calculation based on the purchase price. We tell them on the quote how much is going to be expected to pay in taxes.
Okay. All right.
We provide that information as well with the code.
That's fantastic. Okay. Apparently, UEFA Euro qualifiers Wales 1, Finland 0. The things you learn on these courses is quite extraordinary. Thanks, Peter, for that. Keeping updated with the football there. With special interest in Wales tonight. Marcelo, loans available for land only and new construction. Great question, Marcelo. How does that process work for evaluation appraisal? Can you lend on land? And what about new builds?
Okay, in Portugal, the banks will not lend on land. The client always need to buy cash with his own funds, the land.
Yeah.
And then we can approve a mortgage for the construction, for example.
Yeah.
But the client always need to pay for the land. We don't.
That's good to know. That's simply dealt with there for you, Marcelo. And are there, over to Philip, are there any minimum requirements for depositing funds to the lender providing the mortgage, such as a percentage of the loan amount or set amount of euros?
Yes, always 30%. So maximum achievable, if your details will allow it, I would say 70% is the maximum you can always obtain in Portugal for a non-resident. So you always need to have 30% minimum.
Excellent. Okay, that's wonderful. And you may have said this, but let's just refresh Carol's memory if you did. How long is the pre-approval good for? 3 months, 6 months? Is it like the FBI criminal check? How long does it last for?
No, so normally approval, let's say we obtain an approval and the client doesn't have a property yet. So this specific approval would be valid for 60 days, normally, up to 60 days.
Right.
But within 60 days, you come back and you have a property. We need to always refresh your mortgage application with last bank statement, last pay slip, even probably again another credit report. So if you take longer than that, we do have a bank that where the approval is valid for 6 months, for example. But again, we need to refresh as well with all the documents.
All right, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The Dream Team link is in the chat. Thanks for that as well, Astrid, tonight. Thank you for that question, Carol. I think we're probably going to begin to conclude the recorded part. Are there any more questions? I think, Philip, you had your hand up earlier on. Does anybody have a question that they want to ask right now? I think we're good. Okay on that. So anything else, Vera, that I've not prompted you to speak about in conclusion then with this process? I mean, we've had these conversations with Jacqueline previously. This is very straightforward. This is something we love about Mortgage Direct. You are very pal, queijo, as we say in Portugal, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Okay. So anything else to add?
Not on my side. I think we pretty much cover everything. Maximum age, debt to income ratio. That will depend also currency types. Not all the currencies are accepted. You need to have that in mind, depending which currency you are. If you're not receiving in euros, which country are you a tax resident as well? It's very important.
All right, so don't forget to get your Spartan FX account as well. Oh, okay, that's prompted just a few more questions and a few quickies here. Forecast for rate. I don't understand what that means, but you probably do, Vera. Forecast for rate, question mark.
Can I see the question? Or I don't.
It's the third question up from the bottom. A forecast for rate. Maybe Marcella, you can add to that. We'll go to Sloan. Do most banks have prepayment penalties? How would that work if you want to pay off early, Vera?
Yes, correct. We do have. That's a very good question. So again, regulated by the Bank of Portugal. This has nothing to do with the bank. So it doesn't matter which bank you have your approval with. If you do have a variable rate and you want to make early payments, you will have your redemption fee of 0.5% on the amounts paid. If you do have a fixed rate, then it's going to be 2% on the amount paid. Let's imagine on year 2, you will pay 50,000 euros or 20,000 euros. So variable rate 0.5 on the 20,000 euros, fixed rate 2% on the 20,000 euros.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Refinancing, do you offer that? Because that's a question that's come up in the past, isn't it? So can you refinance here in Portugal?
We can.
Okay, refinancing is possible as well. Thank you for that question, Sloan, about the prepayment penalties. LaRonda, here in the US, all your good credit drops off after 10 years. So if you've paid off your credit cards, auto loan, student debt loan, etc., and all of that is gone from your credit report, how do the banks work with that? I'm finding myself having to rebuild my credit because it now looks like I never had any. I guess LaRonda would just have to get in touch with you and find out. I mean, you can only go from where you are, right? And so you build a picture with the information that you've got. I think it's probably what we'd have to do there, LaRonda. And Philip, forecast any idea of how the rates will trend? Do you know what? I'm going to take the crystal ball into the unrecorded part, and that's why you need to be here, folks, for the actual session itself. Make sure you are, for future reference, from 7:30 every Thursday night for the Portugal Calling webinar. Thank you very much for helping us to understand mortgages here in Portugal. Been brilliant tonight. Direct and straight to the point. Vera, thank you very much indeed. Let's end the recording there.